Appreciate it, appreciate it.
Wow, we've got this new book out, God's Crime Scene. What do you mean by God's got a crime scene?
Yeah, you know, my publisher actually gave me some grief about that title. And
Yeah.
I can understand why, because it almost sounds like you're saying God's culpable of some crime. But
Yeah,
that's
did
not
he do
what
a
we're doing.
crime?
Yeah, exactly. So what we did here is I tried to take a look at the evidence for God's existence in a unique way, kind of from the perspective I treat death scenes, because every death scene you walk into, not every death scene is a crime scene. And I discovered something years ago that I realized I was doing kind of intuitively, without really thinking about it. And then as I started to think about it, I said, okay, this is really the principle we use to determine if a death is criminal, because you can die 4 ways. Only
Four
one of
ways.
those is criminal. You could die by natural causes, you could die accidentally, you could die by suicide, or someone can murder you. So when we get called to a death scene, it's not always a murder.
Right.
You know, if it's suspicious, usually it ends up being a murder. But a lot of times people will see something and not quite sure what to make of it, they'll call you out. And when you get there, you've got to decide, is this a crime scene, or is it just a death scene? So is it one of the first 3, natural, accidental, or suicide, or has somebody killed this guy? So one of the things we do, which I realized after maybe a couple of years of doing this, it just kind of dawned on me, is a simple game we play. We don't realize it's a game we're playing, but we ask this question: can I describe and account for everything in the room of the murder by staying in the room? If I can, it's probably not a murder. If I can't, I've got to consider murder as a possibility. Here's what I mean. Let's say I've got a dead body, and I've got a wound, a gunshot wound, and there's a pistol in the room. But the pistol is registered to the victim. And the only fingerprints on the pistol are the victim's fingerprints. And the only DNA in the room is the victim's DNA. I've got no sign that the rooms have been opened. It's locked from the inside. Well, I can explain everything now in the room by staying in the room. That's his pistol. He's owned it for years. It's got his DNA on it. This is going to be an accidental or a suicide. On the other hand, right, I can explain everything in the room by staying in the room.
Okay.
Now let's say I get there and it turns out that gun's not his. It's registered to somebody else. And it's got unknown DNA that's not in the room anywhere. And not only that, there are bloody footprints that lead out the front door. Well, now I can't explain the stuff in the room by staying in the room. The best explanation is outside the room. I've got to shift everything. And this is what turns, really, intruders, the evidence of intruders, is what turns death scenes into crime scenes. So I thought, if we looked at the universe the same way, if we looked at 8 pieces of evidence in the universe, the 8 really most important pieces of evidence in the universe, and we asked ourselves the question, can I explain and account for these 8 things by staying in the room? If I can, then some form of naturalism, evolutionary processes, laws of physics, chemistry, will get it done.
Right.
And you don't need to invoke a creator. But on the other hand, if the best explanation for these 8 things is outside the room, what are we looking for here? So if we treated the universe the same way we treat a death scene and just asked the simple inside the room or outside the room question, what would that tell us? And I think that those 8 things, now I've looked at the 8 things. Leon, let's say I was making a case against you for a crime. I know that would never be the case, but let's just say I was. And I said, I've got a witness who saw Leon at the scene. Okay, that would be okay. But if I also had your fingerprints there and some behaviors before and after the murder that made you did that were suspicious, and maybe some statements you made that implicated you along the way, well, now I've got evidence, or maybe some physical evidence at the scene. Now I've got evidence in broad, different categories, very different categories that all point to you as my suspect. That would be a better case than just having 1 piece.
Yeah.
It turns out that there are 8 pieces of evidence in the universe in 4 very broad categories. Let me just cover them with you real quickly. Yeah. One is cosmological evidence. We have a universe that has a beginning in which all space, time, and matter came into existence from nothing. That's not my view as a theist. That's what the science demonstrates.
So science already says that.
Atheism already accepts that, right. Also, we have the appearance of fine-tuning in the universe for life. Carbon-based life such as ours. That's also rather unremarkable. Even atheists believe there's an appearance of design. They would explain it some other way, but it's the appearance of design. That's the cosmological evidence. We have biological evidence. We have the origin of life from non-life in this universe, and the appearance of design. Another non-controversial, even atheists like Richard Dawkins would say that biology is the study and trying to explain the appearance of design in biology. So we have the appearance of design in organisms, biological organisms. So they have biological evidence. Here's the third category, mental evidence. You have a sense of consciousness.
Right.
And you have free agency, another experience you have. We have to explain this somehow. That's the mental evidence. And then finally we have moral evidence. We have we recognize certain objective, transcendent moral truths. And we have this problem we have with evil. We recognize that evil is in the universe and has to be accounted for somehow. Okay, these are 8 pieces of evidence in 4 broad categories that everyone has to explain regardless of worldview. The burden's not just on us as a theist. As an atheist, I offered explanations for these 8 things. But they weren't good explanations. And to be honest, they weren't satisfying. Let me give you an example of this. Let's just take one category of evidence, okay? Let's take the mental evidence. You and I, we recognize we have a conscious experience. We are more than just brains. We think we have a mind that is able to interact with ideas, with other minds. And in fact, we think we have free agency. We think we can freely choose between 2 ideas. Now think about whether or not that could exist in an atheistic universe. If atheism is true, the only things we have in the universe are material things, physical things. Space, time, matter. Well, space is not. Oh, no, space is a thing. It's not nothing. Space is something. And the science demonstrates that even space came into existence. This is called the standard cosmological model that physicists embrace. What is nothing? Well, nothing is what Aristotle said. It says what rocks dream about. But space is not nothing. Space is something. So if this is the way the universe really is, then you could have a brain. That's physical. That exists in a physical universe. But what about the non-physical thing we call mind? How do we get anything non-physical from a series of physical events governed by physics? How do you get mind in that? This is why this is called by atheists, by anybody, the problem of mind, or mind-body dualism is a problem. Why do we call it a problem? Because you can't explain it from a purely physical explanation that atheism offers about the universe. Sometimes the best argument for God's existence is simply the fact we can have an argument. We can present an argument. Because that requires us to have freedom. Now think about this. If all you have is a physical brain, that means that all that's happening is our physical events in your brain, neurons firing, causing the next neuron to fire. But that means this neuron was caused by a prior neuron, and that goes back in a sequence. You're suggesting we can actually make a free choice? Dominoes can't make free choices. Dominoes simply fall at the prior falling of a domino. But we know we don't think that way.
So laws govern those dominoes, but they don't govern how we think and act.
They don't govern your thoughts.
No.
But if all we have is a physical universe, then they would have to govern. And this is why a dedicated atheist who's consistent, like Sam Harris, would say you don't really have the kind of freedom you think you have.
I think you do, yeah.
Because you cannot control the prior physical events in your brain that have caused this thought. Really? So then, if that's the case, I really can't make the kinds of free choices, even between ideas. I can't read Sam's book and decide that it's right, because the decision is not really mine. That was predestined by a series of predetermined physical events like dominoes that were falling in my brain.
So now we're just pawns.
Yes, we're just pawns to physics.
Yep.
Now, if that's the case, we got to stop calling our correctional facilities.
Yeah.
Because you really can't correct bad behavior by making a decision.
Nothing you can do.
And he would even say that we don't have correctional facilities to rehabilitate people. We simply have these facilities to house those who would do us harm.
Keep us safe.
Yes, because people don't make those kinds of free choices. They're destined.
What a horrible way to look at life.
Yes. Now, we don't experience life that way. So unless we're willing to redefine how we experience life, it turns out that you have to steal from theism to make a case for atheism, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to steal the kind of conscious free agency that we know we possess, because we believe there's a conscious free agent mind that has created us in his image. So we can now account for free agency, but we have to go outside the room of physics and the material universe in order to find a source that's the best explanation for our own free agency. That's a lot to say a lot, right? But the point I'm trying to make is our students are going to be subjected to philosophers and professors in the university who are going to deny the God that we know exists. And they're going to make a case for why that God doesn't exist. But it turns out the fact that they're making a case that they want their students to review and decide betrays the fact that we really are living in a universe in which God exists. Our students need to know that before they hear the case being made by the professor.
I agree. So, okay, let's take a break right here. When we come back, I want to keep unpacking this. The truth is that you are a great example of that, because everything to you was simply evidence. It was sticking to guidelines of solving crimes. You've done it for years and years and years. Now you turn this training, this skill, this gift that God's given you, and you just put it on God and Christianity and the Bible. And I mean, I think for people like us who are watching, go, okay, I got about 90% of what you said, or 70%, just the fact that brilliant men and women take on the Bible and walk it through, like Lee Strobel and others as well, and then go, I'm giving my life to Jesus, is powerful. And I think the rest of us need to. And so I'm glad that you put this book. In fact, we're talking from this book right now, right? God's Crime Scene. And we're going to be right back after the break. But I want to encourage you to get a copy of this. It'll take your life, your confidence, and how you share Christ to a whole nother level. We'll be right back.